Why do you think it's actually not happened yet for Web3 gaming?
The game itself should be attractive before slapping the tokenomics in the face of all the users. What makes MapleStory IP special? We have defined that around the game items. Game companies can only make money with the sacrifice of the existing items that they already sold from the last update. Every time they make an update, they have to sell stronger items, causing power inflation.
There's always a difference between what the West thinks and what the East thinks, right?
Western audience, they view game as like an art. In Asia, more gamers are ROI oriented. We are allowing different users different ways of getting the same joy of reward experience in a different way. To try with our best IP. Nexon is one of the companies in the entire world who can actually try like that. Yeah, that was very, very impressive for me.
Hello and welcome to Press Play in a really fancy setup. This is definitely not us sitting in our bedrooms with webcams anymore, but we'll see how this one goes. I have a really special guest that I booked this place out for because we want to make it special. I have a nice intro for this guest, but I'll let him actually introduce himself. Dominic, thank you for coming. Welcome to Press Play.
Nice to meet you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasant surprise. Whenever someone from the Web3 gaming space is in the country, we always try to, reach out and meet. I have a, brief introduction about you. I don't want to bore people with me doing it, so I'll just do the basics, which is Dominic here is the Chief Business Officer and Vice President at Nexpace, which is the Abu Dhabi sister company of Nexon, correct?
Yeah. So we are subsidiary. Basically a blockchain arm of the Nexon group, one of the largest gaming companies in Asia. We are publicly traded company trading in Tokyo Stock Exchange, and here we are. Yeah.
And if Nexon sounds familiar for anyone listening, it's because you probably know it. If you've been around for the last 20 years, you've probably come across MapleStory in some way, shape, or form. And Nexon is essentially the publisher for MapleStory. And today we're actually here to talk about MapleStory Universe, which is the new frontier for MapleStory. I'm going to start poking, but we'll start with the basics. For anyone that has been living under a rock for the last 20 years, what is MapleStory?
Okay, so MapleStory is a game, a MMORPG game, developed and published, operated by Nexon for the last 21 plus years. It has 250 million plus, worldwide player base. Also, it has 5 billion USD as an accumulated revenue base. And the revenue has been growing constantly with a CAGR of 25%, which is crazy, mind-blowing. And now we are bringing that, long-loved mega IP to the blockchain space. That's MapleStory Universe.
Yeah, I think for people that live in the West, maybe when they think IP and gaming, they usually think Pokemon, Digimon, that kind of stuff. MapleStory is very close to the hearts of a lot of people, not just in Asia, but also beyond, right? Like I grew up in Dubai and I personally didn't play MapleStory, but a lot of my friends that played in the gaming cafes I was in were always playing MapleStory. And I couldn't wrap my head around, why are you playing this? Why are you playing this? And the fact that it's stuck around for over 20 years tells you how strong that IP is. So the question raised here is then, why risk it with Web3? Why are you bringing MapleStory IP to the blockchain gaming space?
Right. It's also a part of the Nexon's greater vision of expanding the existing IPs. It's not about cannibalization or completely transforming the IP, the original game with the new gaming model. It's another version of MapleStory IP, but this time using the blockchain technology. And when it comes to how we are going to reshape and develop the new version using the MapleStory, we had to think about what makes MapleStory IP special. It's not just characters. It's not just the map, or it's the complex experience that MapleStory fans have enjoyed and loved and invested so much. And we have defined that as a reward experience around the game items. So game items is at the core of what makes MapleStory IP valuable, and we have focused our efforts when we were developing and integrating, blockchain with the MapleStory universe itself. So
You're right. Yeah, I think when I think back to my childhood and seeing my friends play, it was always about the loot. It wasn't really always about like it's not so much the Charmanders and the Pikachu's as much as it's like that weapon, that loot drop, that like
Right.
really cool item that you get. And so it does seem logical almost to like bring it to the blockchain. But I'm curious, like, what about MapleStory are you actually tokenizing now? Is it just the items? Like how does MapleStory Universe work on the blockchain today?
Okay, so in the first place, most of the items, except for example, like potions, most of the items will be the NFTs, and those NFTs will be capped in numbers. So basically, all the items that could exist in the game or in the ecosystem itself are capped by numbers. So nobody cannot issue an additional number of, just like Bitcoins, additional number of items, and anyone can issue those items if they have our token, NXPC token. So we are basically protocolizing the item issuance authority to whoever there's out there, and we're basically capping the item supply within the ecosystem. And this is basically the value preservation mechanism that we are bringing in, because the items, game items, are at the core of MapleStory. And on top of that, so basically we are giving the maximum reward experience that actually keeps the value to the players, basically maximizing the reward experience itself. And on top of that, we are expanding to ecosystem to the wider spectrum, giving new way of things are done by the users in our ecosystem. And even developers, creators, they can do anything, they can create anything in our ecosystem, but work around that game items.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's definitely one unique way of doing it. So you're essentially just, you're tokenizing and decentralizing the process of issuing items, which is at the core of what MapleStory has always been about. To MapleStory, I mean, to Nexon's credit, and maybe even to Ubisoft and other kind of really big names credit, there's always a fear of the backlash of integrating Web3 with a really powerful IP or a really big studio. Nexon's not afraid of that, but I'm curious what's the community reaction has been, because I think there's always a difference between what the West thinks and what the East thinks, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how's MapleStory been finding it, and how's Nexon been finding the actual community aspect of it? Is there backlash? Is there openness?
We're not really seeing too much of a backlash. Probably it's also because what the original MapleStory is like as well. It's a bit different from typical console games where the process of starting the game and seeing the actual ending after playing hours and hours on PlayStation or Xbox, it's a bit of a different experience. It's a long-lasting, everlasting grinding where you compete with other players or collaborate with other players, and go for the looting, hunting, going for the more experience, more leveling up, and then going for more valuable items. So basically, we are not providing something hugely different, but maximizing the reward experience itself, so that users can find how can I say, more sustainable or more high stake economy.
So it doesn't seem too different
with
for your average player.
similar experience. And of course, there are few people who would say negative things, but it's inevitable. Obviously, we're not trying to make everyone happy, right? There are certain cluster of users who will enjoy this kind of MapleStory more than original MapleStory, and also there are even newer cluster of audience user pools that we have not tapped into because we're basically we're not forcing all the potential users that are out there to play the actual game. We're also giving out new meta play loop so that they don't really have to log into the game and then download the PC client and, grind hours and hours. So they could do something similar, but still enjoy how our economy is formed and take benefit from it. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned something interesting there, which is like the fact that it's not too different for a lot of your community members. And I think the fact that Nexon's core user base or player base obviously comes out of Asia primarily before the rest of the world. Am I fair to assume that? Okay. Yeah. So my next question was actually going back to you as Dominic, not just as MapleStory. You've worked on kind of the Asia side of things with the blockchain and gaming for not just your journey here with Nexon and Nexpace, but essentially prior as well. I'm curious what some of your findings and challenges have been in your previous roles or in your current role when it comes to kind of building a game or a IP or a brand in Web3 for Asia versus for the rest of the world.
That's a very difficult question, of a very academically challenging, enjoyable question. So I grew up in the Western environment, but somehow moved to Asia when I started college, and then lived in Asia for until now. Like I'm not sure if it's Asia.
It is Asia. Dubai is Asia.
It is Asia, right? But definitely, when it comes to gaming, the audiences are different. They have different tastes. Western audience typically, gaming audience typically, they view game as like an art, something that they are willing to pay and enjoy and consume. In Asia, I think more gamers are very much ROI oriented. They would spend money and they would still be willing to trade if there is a venue. But the goal here for them is to compete with other players. They're very much more collaborative in Asia. They enjoy games that are, how can I say, multiplayer games and wider ecosystem kind of games as well. In that sense, that's probably why we are getting more traction when it comes to blockchain games in Asia, because it has that kind of mindset or investor or trader kind of mindset into account in the first place. So we still view the Asia market is the core market that we need to focus on from now on. From the beginning. Not just because MapleStory IP is much more well known here in Asia, but also those are the types of players who would be more interested in the high stake, competitive, grinding economy that we are building. Yeah.
No, that's a fair assumption for sure. And I think before maybe Black Myth Wukong came out, there weren't many non-multiplayer, I'm not going to say single player, but like non-multiplayer heavy games that were like huge when it comes to Asia, right? Like when I think Asia and gaming, typically the first thing that comes to my mind is Faker and League of Legends, right? Like immediately I'm like, SKT, T1 dominating for the last God knows how many years. And like, it's just a very different audience. And you're right to say that because I feel like it's games like Call of Duty, like, the Activisions of the world. Those are the games that typically tend to be more Western focused.
Right.
But it always seems like the more high stakes, more competitive, more like I'm going to put in 100 hours a week or whatever playing a game to then become the champion. Those tend to be very Asia focused. And I think you see it also when like, the Korean players or teams face off like the NA teams, they usually dominate them, and that's not their own fault. It's just maybe the way it's taken a lot more seriously. There's like academies, there's it's not just
training
esport.
camps.
Yeah, exactly. And esports is not just like a fun thing. It's actually a whole career that a lot of players go through.
It is invented in Korea, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and some of the best teams are there, so it definitely makes sense. Going back a bit now to MapleStory, we talk about this actually quite a bit, but I'm curious how you guys are kind of seeing things. So the traditional way of making money in a free-to-play game, which MapleStory is you charge a lot of money later on through microtransactions and so on and so forth. The whole point, or a partial point of blockchain gaming is you don't do that anymore. Because now you can monetize in different ways.
Right.
So I'm curious, how creative are you guys getting with monetization?
So we are basically getting rid of that model. We actually started this very project out of curiosity or even sense of urgency that free-to-play live operations model will not last because by structure, game companies can only make money with the sacrifice of the existing items that they already sold from the last update. Every time they make an update, they have to sell stronger items, causing power inflation in the entire gaming economy. And it goes, endlessly. And at some point, nobody wants the inflation, and there will be, the marginal revenue that they will be creating, game companies will be creating, will be smaller and smaller. And eventually, if the game companies keep on doing that recklessly, the IPs will just die by itself. So we are basically getting rid of that authority to endlessly issue the items and sell it to everyone who wants it. We're basically capping that number of items and the decentralizing or protocolizing, giving out the authority to issue the items to the token holders. Anyone who has a token can issue the items and create their own contents even, do whatever. Even us as the operator of MapleStory and the core game contents plus other synergy apps that will be operating in the ecosystem, we will have to, deposit or lock our token to get the items in, put it in the game, place it in the game. So those are some of the material. There's fundamental difference that we are making in the new economy of MapleStory Universe, and instead of that, instead of selling more items, and causing power inflation, we are basically trying to become an ecosystem platform where more people gather for that high stake rewards or value preserving assets that are backed by long loved IPs and get earn the platform fees. Those are the new type of monetizations that we are trying to build around here.
So you're essentially letting the players issue and own and trade, and then you're now instead just making money off of the fees, the royalties essentially. So instead of just, like you said, launching a whole new collection or, a whole new set of items that have to be powerful, otherwise no one cares.
Right.
You're now just letting everyone trade as they want. So you don't have that power inflation abuse, as you mentioned.
Right.
But at the same time, you're recouping some of that through the revenue of royalties or the fees.
Exactly. And another model is the contribution. We're basically distributing the token depending on the contribution that anybody makes in our ecosystem. So those contribution will also be distributed to different developers, creators, even community members if it's relevant. And that token itself becomes more spread out. And bringing more liquidity to our ecosystem. So it's another way for us to monetize.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm curious, especially in your previous role as well, working back in Oasis, why do you think it's taking this long for games to actually understand or crack the concept of blockchain gaming? Is Is it misalignment of incentives? Is it the quality? Like, why do you think it's taken us? Because you've been in the space for longer than most people,
Right.
and you've seen a lot more games as well working in Oasis in the past. And obviously, not all of them tend to be great. Not all of them actually end up releasing. So I'm just curious, like, why do you think? Because we have all these great concepts academically or strategically, why do you think it's actually not happened yet for Web3 gaming?
I think, I mean, it's really my personal opinion. In my previous roles, basically, I was my day would typically starts at like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, taking meetings until like midnight or even later. And most of the meetings are all with different game studios all around the world. And they all say they all talk about their tokenomics gaming model, how it's going to be sustainable and all and such. But after a while, having hundreds and thousands of meetings like that, I kind of realized why wouldn't why would all they fail? Like. But probably my own conclusion was that they have no users, meaning the game itself should be attractive. It's not just about, putting very shallow, very short-living content and putting blockchain in there or tokenomics in there, and it won't last, right? So it's really important to have the entertainment as a backbone. I mean, the concept of providing a high level of entertainment as a fundamental, how can I say, assumption? I mean, presumptions before slapping the tokenomics in the face of all the users. So one of the reasons why I decided to join the team at MapleStory Universe is that particular difference that I saw from other game companies. It's the actual proven IP that is still profitable, still operating, still popular in the world. And the level of time and efforts and capital that Nexon has put just showed me how committed they were in this particular project. And that was the fundamental difference. I mean, I've also worked with all the other, large corporates like, I don't know, like Ubisoft, Sega, Bandai Namco, all these guys. But it was just another level, the commitment. It was more like, for other companies, I'm not saying they're bad or it's completely rational, but it was more like, try it. Yeah. If you somehow make it, let's try it more. But when it comes to like Nexon, it's like, you try with our best IP.
It's like they're not holding back.
Yeah. So that
they're not going with
if
like
it
the
really
B-list.
fails, we can just fail it. And Nexon is not one of the companies that exist in the entire world who can actually try like that. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just about trying, of course, but that was very, very impressive for me personally. Yeah.
No, and I think, to your point, it's a bit of the egg and the chicken, right? Where it's like we think we have to have good games and enough players so that the IP can come in from big studios. Mm-hmm. But then there's another thought, which is the IP needs to be here so that then people care, so we get more players. And I think if we learned anything the last 6 to 12 months, it's especially with NetEase doing what they're doing with Marvel Rivals, it's like IP still is a really big part, because Overwatch and Marvel Rivals are not that different as games. It's just that no one cares about Overwatch characters anymore, but everyone wants that Spider-Man skin, that Fantastic Four, like new characters. Like IP does play such a huge role.
And one of the how can I say, learnings that I've also had recently was that it's very difficult, even for game companies, to actually see where that value is coming from. Many companies would know, if they have it and developed and worked around that for a long time. For example, like Marvel's example, It's around the characters. It's around the stories. So the companies that have IPs, they create cash flows and business models, starting from that point, that particular point. For example, like Marvel, or I mean, it could be, I don't know, like story itself. Then they would create something else. But because those are the characters, superheroes that many people would love to, interact with, they focus on that and create new BM, new cash flows based on that, or action figures. Those are good business, good cash flow for them as well, right? And there's a MapleStory. MapleStory is not just about character. It's not like Marvel's. It's not like Super Mario. It's not like Final Fantasy, the story. So the tremendous amount of time and efforts has put into what makes MapleStory valuable was very, very impressive for me and mind-blowing for me.
I was actually going to go to that next, which is we know good games take a very long time to build. MapleStory Universe, we've heard about for quite some time now. I think it's been just over 2 years almost. And I read somewhere that you guys have over 100 people working on the game, specifically the blockchain game. So I'm curious, like, what's that experience been like? 2 years in a space full of uncertainty, full of ambiguity. No one knows if it's going to last or not. Fully committed through MapleStory Universe, having 2 years of development plus 100 people working on it. Any other learnings, any challenges that you guys have faced? Maybe any doubts along the way?
Even now, like we're still debating. However, before actually, before actually we start putting into lots of resources to actually start developing, I think there were lots of debates, discussions to define what could be the core venue that will start the what do you call it, the value cycle. And I heard there was a long, they spent a long time identifying that particular element, which is game assets, right? And it's not because they didn't know. It's more like how can I say, conclusion. Looking at all the other cases they have worked on with MapleStory. MapleStory, there are lots of different contents that use MapleStory IP. MapleStory, the original version, MapleStory Classic, MapleStory M, the mobile, MapleStory World, etc., etc. And eventually, the reason why every time they tried new things, the reason why they were all successful was because they somehow figured out that game asset is what matters in MapleStory experience. And we somehow realized that looking at previous examples and focused on that when integrating blockchain and designing gaming economy. And obviously, other difficulties or challenges that we are facing daily include like regulations.
It's getting easier. It's getting easier now. Yeah,
could be. Yeah, let's see. We'll see. But we kind of have a hope that maybe we somehow someday we will no more spend this amount of money to lawyers.
Yeah, no, it's a crazy part of blockchain gaming space that people overlook. It's like you're not just building a game, you're building an economy. Therefore, there's extra eyeballs on you.
Exactly.
And you immediately assume
when
the
these
worst.
assets have actual tradable treats and actual value, like people start thinking.
It's like, why is this 8-year-old making 10, 20, 30K selling assets in a game? Even though they might be, right? Selling accounts and making that money. But when it's the blockchain, it's always tricky. you guys obviously it was first hints and a Twitter account and like tweets here and there about MapleStory is coming to Web3, but then obviously now it's not a secret anymore, and you know everyone's well aware. Just a few months ago, you were awarded most anticipated game
Right.
in 2024.
Yeah. I was there.
Yeah, in the Game Awards. Actually, yeah. You picked up the prize yourself in Manila in the Philippines. The reason I'm asking this is for a lot of the studios that actually end up winning these awards, they tend to be like either grassroots indie, like, you know, game developers that sure they have experience, but like this is a new space, and so they appreciate the recognition, right? Like they're looking for it. MapleStory doesn't need any recognition, right? Like Nexon doesn't need the pat on the back. But I'm curious, does that prove anything to you? Is it testament to anything? You know, do you look at the Web3 gaming space, even though it's so new and so almost like it's an infancy stage, and look at it and say, oh, like we're glad they're welcoming us besides everyone that we already have? Because you guys alone, like you just said millions of players, right? If those millions actually come into the Web3 space, I think that's the whole concept of a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like if MapleStory comes here and brings their players, all the games will have more players. So I'm just curious, what was that experience actually like for you? Because I was surprised to see you there personally. So I was
really?
like,
Yeah.
MapleStory is here.
Yeah.
Why is MapleStory here? You know, but at the same time, it was a good surprise because I was like, I love the fact that you're, you know, grounded and you're looking around and saying, yes, like we're building with you side by side. So just tell me more about that experience.
We still do debate a lot who should be the right profile of users that we need to target. We tried like Web 2, Web 3 kind of categorization, gamer, non-gamer kind of categorization, but it's really hard to clear cut, you know, those categories of users, especially in Web 3, because they're like mixture of everything.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, we're trying to, how can I say, like, we're basically trying to come up with a new metric that should be able to count those kind of people. We're not bringing, I mean, we don't have to stick to the existing metrics or categorization of people. So like, for example, like it could be something like ROI gamers. Like, what are they? They're not Web 2. They're not Web 3. I mean, some are, but what is Web 2 user anyway?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's a very,
if you don't have a
yeah.
MetaMask account, are you a Web 2 user? Or like,
It's a very generic way, I think, of categorizing users.
exactly. And users, and you know, according to their user behavior, they are not as simple as we think, or they're not as simple as, you know, things that we could categorize, right? So we're trying to come up with new metrics to, you know, better interact with them, better invite them, better attract them. And personally, I'm also realizing that the original fans of MapleStory are very similar to, you know, those kind of people that we should be targeting. So first, we are targeting, you know, people who would know MapleStory. They somehow played when they were young.
Yeah.
They have nostalgia. Now they have jobs. They have
Families, kids.
kids. And they have money, right?
Yeah.
So it could be some, you know, first level target that we could start interacting with. And second would be, you know, native Web3 degens who would see an opportunity in our project and do their part in our ecosystem. Because, as I mentioned, we're not forcing everyone in our ecosystem to play the actual game and grind, you know, day or night.
Yeah, you can just interact with the marketplace.
And we are also allowing another meta play loop kind of stuff, so they don't have to necessarily interact with the actual game. And not everybody has all the time to sit in front of the PC and grind all night. Obviously, we are allowing different users different ways of getting the same joy of reward experience, but in a different way. But still fall in love in MapleStory.
I see. So that's why you still care, basically, because for you, your audience is not defined yet. It can be the people that watch our awards. It can be people that play your game for 20 years. It can be people that maybe don't even want to play the game. They just think, oh, I can make a lot of money trading these assets. And so there's an open mindedness.
And those are the audience that Nexon is trying to explore and expand as a target of our IP. Yeah. So probably this is how we see the IP expansion. User expansion is the IP expansion. Just like Twitch, opened up the whole new market of game watching market. Just like mobile phone opened up for idle gamers, like
free to play
mothers, all the moms and grandmas who would play hours and hours on their phone.
You're so right. These things didn't exist like a few decades ago, but we take them for granted. I think we always just think, stream on Twitch. It's like, but Twitch was not a thing, back in the day. No, I love that. I mean, I'm curious now, since we're talking about achievements, looking forward a bit. What are your plans for 2025? Anything to look out for? Anything that we should be expecting, keeping an eye out for when it comes to MapleStory Universe?
Basically, this year is going to be remarkable. We are targeting to launch within first half. And then there will be exciting updates around our ecosystem. It's not just about the game itself. There will be more synergy apps to be announced, more ways for people to work around our ecosystem as well. There will be more partners, developers, creators who will be onboarded into our ecosystem. So lots of exciting updates coming up. But first and foremost, the game launch. I think a lot of fans who have tasted our game during our several beta tests last year are, they keep on asking, like, when?
Everyone's favorite question.
When launch? I think the wait is not going to be too much long, depending on how they feel. But
does the game launch with the economy, or okay, so both
they have to work together. So
so both launch the first half of 2025 if everything goes according to plan. Nice. That's, you mentioned partners, and I think you guys are in great company, obviously, with Avalanche. Shout out to them if they're tuning in, and a lot more people that have kind of put their eggs in your basket, really, right? Like, no pressure, but a lot of people are counting on MapleStory to create this like balanced experience of Web2 delight and enjoyment and fun and nostalgia with recognizable IP, but at the same time, like, actually respect Web3 for what it is. Give attention to the degens that want to trade, but also allow players to be part of that ecosystem. We can go on for hours and hours, but I want to give you also an opportunity to maybe highlight things that we didn't necessarily highlight in the conversation. So I'm curious if there's anything you'd like to share with the audience, if it's our community, if it's your community. MapleStory Universe, Dominic, what would you like to tell people listening in today?
First of all, I'm very glad that I'm here. PFP. Oh, sorry, F2F, sorry.
F2F.
Not PFP. 2D-Gen. F2F. And we are going to be sharing lots of updates, especially, starting from now. Follow us on Twitter. MapleStory U is our handle, the official account. From there, you'll be able to browse around how to join the Discord, who to follow within our team, our CEO, myself, other key members who are very, very active in the X space as well. So there should be plenty of information for everyone who is interested in our project, to learn and feel bullish about our project.
For everyone listening in, can they try MapleStory Universe right now?
Not right now.
Okay.
But
Any
If
upcoming
anyone-
betas before the launch, or
Not at the moment.
Okay.
But launch is
Soon.
upcoming. Yeah.
soon? When?
Yeah.
Soon.
Soon. Yeah. Very soon.
No, I appreciate that for sure. No, thank you so much for coming. Like I said, it's a special episode with a special guest and definitely a special game. The pressure is on you now, so you've won most anticipated game in 2024. You can no longer be anticipated. So 2025, the target should, I guess, be game of the year.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
best RPG. People's choice, maybe, you know, getting the community in to vote. So I think there's a lot of exciting stuff for MapleStory.
I would almost cry.
No, I'm genuinely, I'm telling you, it was a nice surprise to turn around and be like, oh, MapleStory's here. That's nice. But you know, I think on behalf of everyone in the space, like we definitely do appreciate obviously everything you guys do, because I think Nexon, like you said, and even to their credit, Ubisoft, because I know Ubisoft gets a lot of heat these days with like how bad the Assassin's Creed games are, but the studios that have been experimental, that have been bold, that have been brave enough to try, even if they know they might fail, I think there's a certain element of respect that you have to give them, whether or not, if you care about Web3 or you don't, the fact that they're actually willing to try. And I think the fact that Nexon is trying with its biggest IP, like you said, is testament to, you know, how much they believe in what they're building. So thank you so much for joining us. For everyone that's tuning in, hopefully you liked how crispy the studio is, and you know, seeing us in 4K or whatever you're watching on. If you're just listening in and you want to hear more from Press Play, make sure you tune in. Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Twitter. I think it's pretty much anywhere you want to listen to. So make sure you tune in to previous episodes, but also upcoming episodes as well. Dominic, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining me on Press Play, sir. And all the best.
My pleasure.
MapleStory.
Likewise.